Good afternoon, and welcome to the ENR webinar, On-Ramps, Off-Ramps, Keeping Talented AEC Women Engaged. I'm Suzanne Motika, Vice President of Services Delivery for InEight. Today we're going to hear from several panelists on the discussion around women in the AEC industry, why female turnover is higher than male, and what their companies are doing to attract and retain them. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you about the company I work for, InEight. InEight is a software company that is a wholly owned subsidiary of Kiewit, a Fortune 500 construction company which is consistently ranked in the top 5 of ENR's top 400 contractors. Kiewit purchased InEight in 2012, and construction experts, along with IT professionals, have spent the last several years building out products to support all phases of a capital project lifecycle. Products that automate, digitize, and streamline construction operations. InEight has over 750 clients with 300,000 users in 33 countries. Our software offers the most functionally complete, interoperable, and modular portfolio built to manage capital programs. These solutions span projects from design through estimate and field execution all the way to final turnover. They give you the real-time information and insights you need to minimize risk, improve operational efficiency, control project costs, make educated decisions, and collaborate easily with all your project stakeholders. The InEight solution drives the EPC process by providing a common repository for all as-designed, as-planned, and as-built information that enables organizations to capture lessons learned from completed projects and turn that data into knowledge to benchmark future projects. The topic today is significant to me personally, as I've worked in the construction and engineering industry for the last 20 years, and it's always been a challenge as a female leader to ensure that I'm balancing the demands of my career, along with the needs of my family, and still getting the opportunities that I'm qualified and ready for. I've been involved in several initiatives with Kiewit, and now InEight, which focuses on our commitment to women and how we attract, develop, and retain them within our organization. It begins with our recruiting efforts. Quarterly, we host a Future Kiewit Women in Kiewit Summit, where we invite female students that are majoring in construction and engineering fields and give them the opportunity to network with our female leaders to learn about our organization and culture. For employees, this continues with quarterly calls and a company-wide mentorship program, among other events and initiatives. The software and technology industry really isn't that different with the issue of female retention and career development. Since InEight is owned by Kiewit, we are taking advantage of the established initiatives and have kicked off the Women at InEight program. This program continues to focus on construction and engineering, but also adds in female software and technology professionals. Now I'd like to hand it off to our moderator, Deborah Rubin, to introduce our panel.
Suzanne, thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar, Off-Ramps, On-Ramps, Keeping Talented AEC Women Engaged. This event, brought to you by Engineering News Record, is sponsored by InEight. I'm your moderator, Deborah Rubin, Editor-at-Large of Management, Business, and Workforce at ENR. We thank our sponsor, InEight, for sharing its efforts to advance women, and to all of you for joining us. There's been intense debate over trends that indicate that highly qualified women professionals are dropping out or permanently leaving their technical and management track careers in the construction sector. Are the complex demands of work and modern family life the problem? Is it gender-based stereotyping or lack of communication and recognition? Or maybe it's a little of all of these. Our panelists today will provide an update on unique research as to why industry women head for the career off-ramp and offer insights on how good employers are removing obstacles and boosting workplace cultures to keep women on the road to success. I am very pleased to welcome to today's presentation 3 outstanding presenters who also shared their insights at ENR's groundbreaking Women in Construction conference last year in San Francisco in a very dynamic panel discussion. First up is Dr. Romila Singh, Associate Professor of Human Resource Management in the Lubar School of Business at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, who will share critical research funded by the National Science Foundation on why women STEM professionals leave engineering and construction and best practices to keep them in place. Also joining us today is Laura Royster, Senior Vice President and Managing Partner at management consultant Saxon Hamilton. In her work with senior executives and leadership teams in AEC firms and on projects, Laura draws from her own experience as well as the firm's 30 years of research and practical expertise in human behavior and group dynamics. She will share insights for women seeking more senior roles and how they can lead with creativity and confidence. Angela Cody, Project Executive at Gilbane Building Company, will be our concluding speaker. She has been involved with many high-profile projects during her 22 years at the firm that have received multiple local, national, and international awards. Angela will share her own experiences and how both work-life balance and career advancement are possible. She is currently working with the Associated General Contractors in Houston to launch a Women in Construction initiative, among several industry involvements. Thanks to all our presenters for being part of this webinar today and for sharing key research and insights on how the best AEC employers are keeping the construction sector's talented women on the track to success. Before we hear our panelists' insight, please watch this brief instructional video on how to use your webinar console.
Welcome to this webinar. Before we begin the presentation, I want to provide you with a few housekeeping items. On your screen, you will see a taskbar with icons. Each icon is assigned to a particular element of today's webinar. Click on the person icon to learn more about today's speakers. Throughout the presentation, you can network with others or submit questions to the speakers in the Q&A and chat box next to the slides. Download resources from the cloud icon. After the webinar is over, please take our survey to tell us how we did. Today's event is being recorded and archived and will be available within 24 hours. For on-demand questions or comments, send us an email by clicking Need Help? Email us. If you experience any technical issues today, please refresh your browser by hitting F5 for PC or Command R for Mac. And now I'm excited to turn it over to today's moderator.
Don't forget to submit your questions, and later in the program, our presenters will address as many as possible. Today's event is being recorded and archived on enr.com/webinars. And now I'm excited to turn things over to today's first presenter, Dr. Romila Singh.
Thank you very much, Deborah. I'm very grateful to Deborah for her vision to bring in so many different voices and leaders into this platform and allow us to continue this conversation on a very important topic. She catalyzed this conversation last year, and I'm really thrilled to be partnering again with two brilliant and inspiring women leaders, Laura Royster and Angela Cody. What the data that I'll be presenting today echoes a lot of the stories, a lot of the feedback that they have shared over the last year. As I get started, I'd like to tell you about how this project came about, the research that I'm be speaking about. I have worked in partnership with my colleague Nadia Fouad from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee for the last 10 years. And really, this is a culmination, or this is a continuation of a series of stories. One part of the story we talked about last year in terms of why women take the off-ramp, why women engineers take the off-ramp and leave engineering, why women engineers who decide to come back to the workforce, what are the things that they're looking for, and another group where women who decide that they will not even take the on-ramp into engineering workplaces after they have taken their degrees, after they've graduated with their degrees in engineering. This is a continuation of the story we are looking at in terms of, so the people who are staying on in engineering, both men and women, what is it that differentiates them from the folks who have taken the off-ramps, and how can we, working in different organizations with different teams and in leadership positions, make sure that we create this kind of energy to allow them to flourish in the different lanes that they are on so that they are not excited to take the off-ramp of this engineering superhighway, so to say. So the data I'll be talking about is about what makes for a great engineering workplace and how can we work to make engineers feel excited and engaged at work. This project, as Deborah mentioned, is also funded by the National Science Foundation. This is the third part of the second National Science Foundation that we received. And let me give you a little bit of a preview in terms of how big the project was. First off, in terms of who are these engineers, we did ask people to identify themselves as engineers. So if they say that I have got the engineering background, I have the skills, and I see myself as an engineer, they were given the survey. We worked through all the professional associations of engineering, and I'm saying all as in I think with 25 or 30 or maybe even more than that, we contacted and they sent the link to the members. So if those folks who are joining us on the webinar today are part of that, thank you, thank you, thank you. We also partnered with a variety of organizations. At the end, we got about 3,000 plus responses. And among those folks who started the survey, about 1,000 plus, about 1,100 completed the survey. Of this group, about 61% were men and rest were women. The average age of our respondents was about 46 years. You can see the demographic breakdown in terms of the majority of the people were who self-identified as Caucasians. There was a small group of folks who identified as Latino or Latinas, Asian Americans, African Americans, multiracial, and Native American, American Indian. We have a majority of the folks who were in some kind of a long-term relationship or said that they were married, and about 2/3 of our workforce mentioned that they were licensed engineers. Most of the folks had a bachelor's degree in engineering, but at least half, if not slightly more than half, had an additional graduate degree. Most of them worked in, half of them worked in civil engineering, and you can see that construction is about 6.9% of the sample that we tapped. So when we took a look at, what are some of the things that characterize an engaged workplace, a few things that jumped out at us in terms of the results that we got from our survey. One was workload management. This is the smallest part of it, and when I say the smallest part of it, when you're talking about incremental changes to make in creating somebody's, making somebody's day exciting and energizing, this is where you start. Make sure that they understand what the work involves, whether they have the autonomy to get things done, whether they have a clarity in terms of the goals and deliverables, whether they have the support. So workload management, not making it too overwhelming, making it clear, making it supportive, giving them autonomy, giving them flexibility is a key part of it. And it starts building up from there. What really helps in creating and sustaining an engaged workplace for engineers, specifically for engineers, is when they have the flexibility and the freedom and the space to bring their whole selves to work. And this is very important. And when I get into some of the details in terms of, how men and women differed in that, I'll speak a little bit more about that. But this is really a key part of it. Can you bring your whole self to work, or do you have to conceal a part of your identity when you come in as an engineer, and only that part is active at work? So what we have found is that being able to bring your whole self to work, feeling safe that you can, function and flourish at work is really key to feeling energized and excited about work. Leadership matters, and support from the leadership matters a lot in terms of to what extent your bosses, your supervisors, your project leaders are on board with you, provide you with the freedom, the flexibility, provide you with resources of different kind, clear the obstacles, all the things that Angela will describe as well as Laura will describe. So they have lived those things, and we have captured part of that in our data as well. Another thing that jumped out is to what extent these folks experienced transparent promotion paths and avenues. So what does it take to move up around here? What does it take to get the next challenging assignment where I can showcase my skills? What are the criteria for promotion anywhere around here? So these are the kind of things that was very important for folks to feel that they have a place in this organization. They have a way to contribute the skills, and they have ways of getting recognized for that, at least in terms of growth and advancement opportunities. And again, two of our panelists will speak more about how important these elements are, and our data captured part of that. When you're talking about developmental opportunities, equity matters. And again, in terms of whether men and women are given these kind of developmental opportunities to the same extent as, whether women are given the same developmental opportunities as men. So it's not that because there's an assumption that women may be juggling other responsibilities in their family life or outside obligations that somehow they will not be equipped or they will not be available to take on some of the challenging assignments. This is where some of the disengagement comes in. And finally, I'd like to also mention really quickly, work-life policies and culture matter. So it's not enough to provide these policies, but it has to be anchored and embedded in a culture that recognizes that people have a life outside of work. So moving on to the next part of it, so where did we find gender differences and where did we see no differences between men and women engineers? In terms of work engagement, we did not see that men and women differed. So both these groups, 60% men and 40% women in our sample, said they were excited and energized and flourished at work. So there were no gender differences. In terms of the feeling that they were overwhelmed and overworked, yes, no differences at all. Again, they were both overworked and overwhelmed, but they were still engaged. So go figure, right? The more it's given to you, the more you can also thrive. They were, both men and women were satisfied with their pay, they were satisfied with the jobs, and they were satisfied with being engineers and contributing to the engineering profession. They felt, both men and women felt, that they were given opportunities to develop the skills and be being able to leverage the skills for advancement, for growth opportunities that were provided to them. Interestingly, there were no differences between men and women. Remember, about 80% of the sample was married or is in some type of a long-term relationship. There were no differences between men and women in terms of the level of work-family conflict that they reported. So men were experiencing at the same level as women, or women were experiencing at the same level as men. Either way, there was no difference. And both these groups of people were constantly on the lookout for other opportunities in other organizations, in other fields. So that's where a little off-ramp is coming up, right, in terms of how do you prevent these folks from looking at the green fields and green pastures that are elsewhere. So where did we find gender differences? We found that there was a slight bit of difference in terms of engagement, very marginal, but it was because of a large sample size. We did detect a little bit of that. You can see on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest. Men were 4.97, women are 4.8. They're both high. The feeling that you are empowered at work, your boss has given you the autonomy and flexibility to get things done the way you want to get things done. Slight difference between men and women, but because of a large sample size, significant. Again, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest amount, men and women were inching towards the higher end. In terms of feeling recognized, valued, and supported by the organization, they were both in the middle. Even though men felt more recognized and supported by the organizations, they were right in the middle, like, it could be better, but it's there. Work-family balance, to what extent the organization recognized and supported that and the culture was in that favor, men and women were making sure that they were communicating that they wanted more. They had some support, but not as much. You can see that one of the biggest differences in some ways is where the being able to bring your whole self to work. Again, men said that they were able to do that much more than women, even though women did feel much more comfortable compared to one of our other studies where they did not feel as comfortable in bringing the whole self to work. Both men and women said they had clarity about their goals. So how does this all come together? So the key takeaways that we found from our study in terms of what keeps engineers engaged at work are four big things. One is you got to make sure that the work that they're doing is meaningful, that they have manageable workload, and that they have the flexibility and autonomy to carry it out to the best of their ability. They also have to be embedded in a very supportive structure with bosses, with coworkers that provide the kind of resources that they need to get things done. There's transparency in terms of what are the goals, what are the deliverables. Obstacles are removed with the help of teamwork, with the help of support from bosses and coworkers. There is flexibility in the workplace with recognition. And in terms of talking about bringing your whole self to work, it is the DNA of what is a respectful and inclusive workplace, if you can be yourself at work. Growth opportunities is a big thing in terms of a variety of forms, whether they're getting the training and development, and whether there is equity in terms of the pay, whether there's equity in terms of promotion criteria, and transparency as well. So these are the factors to keep in mind for folks who are looking at, so how do we make sure that we create these energized workplaces, and if we have to make sure that we are not inadvertently creating off-ramps, these are the things to keep in mind. Coming up from this data, some of the best practices that I'd like to share with you, again, along the same themes. Because we took a very sweeping perspective, trying to fix one part of the system is not going to do it. It is a systematic and a systemic effort to change everything from top to bottom. And from the top, from the leadership, the message that we are serious about creating structures and systems and policies that can support everybody's efforts to being much more engaged at work. And I've identified some of those kind of foundational pieces that can go into that. It's very important as a source of a change, figuring out where are the bottlenecks. Do an audit. Find out if the bottlenecks are certain kinds of people, certain kind of leadership issues, certain kind of processes, performance metrics that are not equitable. Where are the bottlenecks? And from that audit, figure out how you can start implementing system-wide changes and try to make it in a way that there is accountability, because without that built-in accountability and metrics, everybody will go on and do whatever they feel like doing. If you want to start really small, as I mentioned up front, starting with workload management is a very sure and safe way to creating engagement and keeping people on that highway. As part of creating a more engaged workplace, I think the very fundamental thing to keep in mind is that it has to have gender equity at the forefront. This cannot be relegated to the back. This is kind of continuation from the message that I had shared with the group last year, which is women do not need to be fixed. They are not broken. They are not part of the problem. Hence, they do not need to have intervention done on them. The issue here is how do we create gender equitable workplaces? And looking at some of the parameters around our data where men and women are experiencing a lot of the same things. So trying to just address problems and saying, oh, we need to do this for the women because we need to get special kind of women will not really work. So gender equity is a key part of this whole DNA in trying to change things. It can be done through monitoring daily work, through performance monitoring, and making sure that there are conversations that focus on skill building. Finally, we are only as good as the information and data that you provide. Your voice matters. Your input and contributions matter. We are just a platform to provide those stories to be elevated and project your experiences. And we need your help again. We need your help for the next phase of our study where we're looking at team dynamics and innovation. Anybody and everybody who's working in teams of 3 or more people with some engineers in their cross-functional teams, we would love to work with you and show how team dynamics can make a difference to innovation. And if you're interested in this, please reach out to me, and I'd love to tell you a little bit more about this and also how you can help us, and through that, help us tell your story. At this point, I'm handing it off to my colleague, Laura Royster. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. I am so excited to be part of this conversation. I have seen so many of the points that you just outlined play out in both positive as well as problematic ways with our clients over the years, and there are such a number of different compelling entry points to this conversation. It's tempting to just follow up on all the things you just talked about. So I'm going to come at this from a very particular point of view, which is through the lens of communication, which is a very common human difficulty. And it is an essential factor when we talk about effective leadership and the role of effective leadership in creating a healthy, diverse workplace culture that is supportive of advancement for both men and women. So this is a conversation that really centers around how we retain the best and brightest women in this industry so that they can not only add real value to their companies, but they can lead fulfilling careers and also be moving into the next generation of leadership of these organizations. So there are a couple of different ways to come at this. And the first one is to talk about the role that senior leadership can play in doing a better job communicating with women employees in a way that allows them to not only have more clarity about their path forward, but that also actually demystifies senior management and executive leadership roles. This is something that I think goes to a really common disconnect that I see all the time with our clients. There is a communication gap that occurs almost continuously, and the higher up you are in executive leadership, the more profound this disconnect ends up being. So what I mean by that is that I see my clients over and over again who, to a large extent, are C-suite executives. They're at the top of these organizations. They think they've been very clear about their priorities, about how much they value conceptually gender diversity and equity in the workplace. They also think they've been very clear about what the paths forward are. And so, of course, it comes as a terrible disappointment and frustration when women who they saw great promise in, who they felt like they'd had very supportive conversations with, that they'd been very clear about the paths forward, end up taking an exit ramp. So let's talk about that a little bit. There are three really important things to double down on here. Making leadership roles understandable, attractive, and achievable. So when I say understandable, I think this is something that I often, sorry about that. Let's go backwards. And, okay. So what I'm talking about here is specific to probably more than anyone, more junior women in the organization, but this is true all the way up. So what this comes down to is really demystifying what executive leadership looks like. I'm sure we've all seen how this plays out when people are very, very good at their jobs and they advance and they get promoted to senior management roles and then above, and they find themselves in a bit of a conundrum where what it takes to be successful as a senior manager and executive leader is a different skill set than what possibly got them promoted in the first place. So it's really good to find ways and drive those conversations down. So encourage your managers at every level to have these conversations with their employees about what the role of management really means. What is the job of an executive? And try to be specific about the skills that you know it takes to succeed in leadership roles. So part of the disconnect, I think, that we sometimes see at conferences like the wonderful GWIC conference is that young women are looking for meaning in their careers. I mean, we're all looking for meaning in our work, but there is a disconnect about what would be attractive about the very challenging role of senior leadership beyond the material compensation. So part of what we want to do is to help sort of boost what makes those roles attractive. So talk to employees in conceptual as well as specific terms about what's both challenging and rewarding about senior leadership positions. A really good way to do that is to be a little bit vulnerable in your personal conversations about how you've experienced the demands of leadership. Some of the most successful leaders that I have seen do this were very, very willing to have conversations where they exposed their own growth path in leadership. It asks a lot of us, both personally and professionally, and I'll talk some more about that in a minute. But that's a great message to send to your employees. So the other thing we want to try to do a better job of is helping that path up through senior leadership feel achievable. So this goes to some of the really important points that Romola was making about transparent promotion and mobility paths. So this is also where a huge disconnect usually comes into play. People will think, senior managers will think that they've been very clear about how to move forward. So you want to be as explicit as possible. Don't let reviews ever come as a surprise. Talk to your employees about what you intend for them. They are wondering how to think about their future. What's next for me? What does my boss see in me? So you want to talk about your ideal scene for your employees so that you are helping to play a really essential leadership role in painting the picture of the future for them. So this is big picture and detailed. One of the things that I find when we're doing executive development coaching, particularly at the PX, ops manager, AM level, is oftentimes there's enough of a jump up that people become very disheartened early on because they knew how to win at the game they were playing one level below, but they get promoted up and they haven't yet figured out how to win at the level where they are now. So giving people development tools proactively, and part of that is having, you might want to get them some executive development work, but even more important than that is sitting down with them and saying, this is exactly what I'm expecting from you in the ideal manifestation of your role. So have those needs, wants, and expectations conversations really early on. Don't be coy about what success looks like in their roles. Help them really see the path to get there. You want to make it as easy as possible for people to invest in the journey with your firm and to stay with you. So another way I want to talk about this a little bit is how, as women leaders within the industry and adjacent to the industry, how we can communicate more effectively to other women about the subject of executive leadership. And what I'd like to suggest is that we broaden the narrative that we use to talk about that. So this is what I was referring to earlier. We tend to double down on this sort of conceptual idea that everyone should want to have a seat at the table because it's fair and there are these wonderful material benefits that can accrue. But I think we sometimes miss an important part of the conversation, which is that an executive leadership position is this incredible laboratory to bring all of your skills, all of your creativity, it's sort of what Romola is referring to about bringing your whole self. Executive leadership does more than just widen your platform of influence. It requires you to bring this whole arsenal of talent and judgment and creative thinking to big problems that can have huge impact just starting with your coworkers and those around you. This is perfect for engineers and builders. Also, are you interested in changing the culture and changing the industry and changing the world? Executives set the tone and direction for their organizations and for the industry. They are an embodiment of those organizations. It's a great way to maximize your impact exponentially, whatever it is that you're passionate about. So I really want to encourage all of us to be earnest and passionate about this industry and in these other more existential benefits of executive leadership that I think sometimes get left out of the conversation. So, in summary, never assume that you've been clear enough. At a leadership level in any organization, more communication, more specificity, more clarity, more honesty is really what's needed. Help make the opportunities that you know are possible for the women in your company and in your industry clearer. What is meaningful and challenging about them? What is the path to get there? And that's a great place to turn it over to the wonderful Angela Cody.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm really excited. I'm going to qualify before I start that my presentation is a little bit more raw and honest, and as far as from my perspective, I'm on the actual employee side, and you guys had asked me to be on this panel as the real life example. So be prepared because I'm going to give some real life stories. So moving forward, I'm going to give you a little background about me and my story. Out of college, I wanted to be a superstar. I wanted to build buildings. I was willing to go wherever they sent me, and I worked for an incredible company that brought me to Houston, and I moved forward. I got married, lived in the dream life, got pregnant, and I suddenly became my boss's daughter, which was a unique place for me to be, and they gave me lots of opportunities and different types of roles within the company, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I ended up, after I had my first son, I moved to a different company and followed my passion. I wanted to do historic preservation. That's what I wanted to do. So I had moved forward, and this company is no longer around, so I can say that I was treated pretty horrible. I was in my second pregnancy, and things just didn't go well on my project. The project went well, but I was 9 months pregnant, and I was standing on a bucket the day before I gave birth to my second son. So but at the same time that was going on, I had 2 stepkids that came to live with me. So I went from 1 kid to 4 kids in about 6 months. So that was a unplanned off-ramp. This was not part of my big dream. This isn't what I thought I was going to do, but it was a family decision. I needed to stay at home because we all know if you have kids, it's a economic issue that 4 kids in daycare versus what a project engineer is making on a job is not a very good work-life balance. So I decided I was going to stay home, and I hated it. Absolutely despised it. It wasn't for me, and just like a new mom, I had a little bit of depression and resentment that my husband's doing this great job. I'm staying at home, raising 4 kids. So then I decided I was going to start my own company. And not just a plug for ENR, but I had also kept my ENR subscription because I'm like, this is going to keep me relevant. I'm going to know what's going on in the industry. I had my business going. I said I'm going to help some people renovate their homes and do that type of work for small businesses, and I enjoyed it. But I really miss building buildings. So I said, it's time. I'm going to figure it out. So I came back to work. And I got a job, and I was told, this is a good job for a mom. And it was in the office. And my entire career, I had always been in the field and had a field-oriented job, so that was weird for me. So I had an opportunity after a hurricane had hit to work in the field. They needed people, they needed bodies, and I got an opportunity to go out there. So they asked me to come to the operations side, and I had to make some decisions, right? My husband traveled to at least 2 to 5 days a week, and I had to juggle kids and buses and all the daycare stuff that I know each of us have our own outline of issues. But so I spent some time, and I talked to the project manager. I said, look, I can do this, but I can only do this if I can get there at 8 a.m. I'll accommodate if we can do earlier, and if I need to be there earlier, I will, but this is the best I can do. And they said, okay, we want you. And I realized then, and I was working for Gilbane, and I'm still working for Gilbane because they really kind of had that same commitment to my career as I moved forward, that if I needed something, I just asked. And we worked together as a team on how do we make that work. Can we move the slide forward one, please? One more. So, well, back up one. I apologize. My computer's frozen. The photographs you guys see are, I could have put probably about 40 pictures on there of all the different things that are coming at you as a working mom, and all the challenges and all the things you need to balance, whether it's some guy screaming at you on site or all the supposed perfect people that we see on social media all day that are our friends. So you can forward one more. So here I kind of wanted to outline some things I think young women or even more mature women who are thinking of checking out of their career in the AEC industry should think about, probably before we just take that off-ramp, because sometimes it is easier when there's all these other things going on. So the first thing is to ask. I mean, I'm a firm believer that if you want something or you need something, you need to ask. I don't think that asking to be there at 8 o'clock was me taking advantage of an opportunity. It was me being honest that this is what I needed to do. But I think at the same time, not take advantage of that you have a situation that you need to discuss. I think there's a lot of opportunities where we can just be honest and say this is the situation and have those true conversations with our manager or other people, even if it's human resources, that say this is what I want to do. And also being honest means that if the company you work for can't fix it, if they don't know that there's a problem, if you're not honest and you don't say that this is what I want to do, this is how I want to do it, then they can't help you. And I think a lot of times, a lot of young women that I mentor, I notice, are afraid to just say, this is what I need, or this is what I would like to do, or how do I get to this next step? The next one was be strong. There's a lot of outside sources, and like my pictures here of, there's other women who make comments like, you poor thing, you have to work. You need to remember, you chose a career in architecture, construction, or engineering because you can do it. You knew when you were young and when you chose this career that you were strong, and you're probably one of the strongest women that you know. You need to stick with it. But you also need to take care of yourself and be physically and mentally strong. One thing that I had, when we have all of these different things going on, sometimes taking care of ourselves is last, and we really need to make sure that we are genuine with ourselves, that you need to go to the doctor. You need to make sure that your blood pressure is right, because I'm a true believer that sometimes you can take care of everybody first. That's a mom thing, but we have to sometimes put ourselves in check too. The next one was don't settle. You need to be clever. If there is something that you want to do, if you want to work in the field, then figure out how to work in the field. You can't always have an expectation that your manager is going to know what you're talking about or even agree. But if you have a clever suggestion that maybe you can work at a different project site and do a different role, then do it. But you also need to be patient. That everything isn't going to happen immediately for you. You need to be willing to make a change. I understand that everybody wants to do exactly what they're doing. They want everybody to adapt around them, and that's not always going to happen. Companies are there to make money and to build buildings in some instances, but sometimes you need to look at what your true capabilities are and evaluate what you can do, and then be willing to make some changes, whether it's your location, your position. But you also need to look at some of your personal things, and I find it interesting. You know, people will say, I have to go to the dentist. It's the only appointment I could get was at 1 o'clock. Well, maybe you need to find a new dentist that can have a morning appointment or an evening appointment or a Saturday appointment. And I think you're going to have to, it's a give and take with your employer in order to make things work. And then find your support network. I know within my company we've got an employee resource group that we're developing to try to help the loneliness factor. And that's one of the things that I'm doing with the AGC. But again, there's an external support, internal support. You can't physically do it all. Sometimes you need to ask for help, whether it's your neighbor or it's a friend or it's a coworker. It's okay. And unfortunately, it took me personally a little bit too long to figure that out, because you want to be able to do it all, but you can't all the time. And then finally, remember that it'll be worth it. Now I'm on the flip side. I have 4 beautiful children. My youngest 2 are teenagers now, and you'll get your life back. And you might be surprised at the woman that you become. I think sometimes we lose ourselves with our family, and we want to do it all, and we might really, when I look back, I'm like, wow, I did way more than I thought I was even capable of in that amount of time, and I've been able to give just as much to my family that I wanted to give. So someone can move to the next slide. A few survival tips. Be realistic with everything and everybody. Someone can do the next one. Not everybody is going to understand or care. There is a lot of people that truly don't care. They've got businesses to run. They've got things that they need to do. And you also need to respect that they're going to want to help you, but a lot of people have their own problems. So you need to make some decisions. And you can't do it all. You need to pick a few things and then hire a maid. I decided that I was going to decide what I wanted to do with my family. Like I promise you, my kids eat Pop-Tarts every day. They buy their lunch at school. But the one thing I was very passionate about was that we were going to have dinner at the table. And we were going to do that as much as we possibly could. It might be McDonald's at the table, but we are going to sit there as a group. I know I've made sports games. I was coming in hot. I tried to be the room mom. We tried to do everything, but I picked a few things that I was really passionate about, but I couldn't physically do everything. There's going to be jerks out there. There's going to be people that are going to try to hold you back. I think personally those are the people that drove me to continue to be successful. If somebody told me that, oh, you just have a hobby job, they know what my husband, oh, I know your husband has a good job. You just did have a hobby job. That just motivated me to be stronger and go forward. Stop comparing yourself. I am, I personally stopped looking at social media. I mean, if we were to look at the people that do Pinterest all day long, we would lose our mind because we simply don't have time to be crafty or do all the crazy things. And then be proud. Is this the easiest path we probably could have chosen? Nope. Is the laundry at my house done right now? Nope. But I promise you I have an extremely proud family, and I'm proud of myself, but also I think when my boys brag to other people, my mom built that building, hey, my mom did that. So be your own kind of Wonder Woman. We can't do it all, but do your own thing. So Deborah, it's all you.
Thank you, Angela, and Laura and Romola for fabulous insights that sound better this year than they did last year. So I hope everyone appreciated this. I think you've got the full gamut here from these presentations. Before we have our presenters address some questions that have been submitted, I wanted to remind listeners to send us your feedback on our online webinar survey to help improve our program. Also, if you are interested and can do it, our 2019 GWIC conference is May 23rd and 24th in San Francisco. You can go on ENR.com and get more information, or contact me and I'll send you the link and what you need to register. So for the first question, which I think I will address to Laura, but if others want to chime in, the questioner is asking, about how to be heard, when you're talking to a supervisor, whether it's about a co-employee or yourself. What are some things that women can do when talking with their senior managers to allow for more clarity about their path forward and about, when there are obstacles in their path?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I could do a really long answer, but here's the short answer. Be blunt and persistent in seeking clarity. And what I mean is ask questions that are easy to answer. This is one of the most common pitfalls that I see. People's time is really short. Do not make it difficult to be understood. You want to be as professional as you possibly can, of course, but you really want to use as few words as possible to get your point across and create understanding in the listener. And that is a universal best practice for communication, but especially in these kinds of situations. If you are coming in with a takeaway that you really need your manager to understand, either about something that is impeding your progress in the workplace or about an answer that you need to have clarity about your decision-making going forward in your career, don't wait until the last 5 minutes of the conversation and the time that you have with them. Go ahead and put your agenda on the table at the very beginning, say what you want to accomplish in the conversation, and then get right to it. And if you don't get a clear answer, give it another shot. Be persistent, be proactive, try to bring solutions as much as possible, but really be clear about whether you've gotten an answer that you need, or if you think you're not getting something across, here's the best piece I've ever heard about moving that forward. You can say, I can see I'm not being clear, so I'm going to have to be more blunt. Just inoculate and put it on the table.
Okay. I think, I'll go on to another question. Angela, you probably, because you've used it, the questioner is saying that his or her company does not have a competitive maternity-paternity leave policy and wants to know what's the best way to get started on creating one. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the history of Gilbane's and how that benefited you.
Well, at the time, I actually didn't work for Gilbane when I was pregnant with my kids. Okay. But I think that I'm probably the wrong person to ask that question to. but I'm certain that there are examples out there, and there's federal regulations for maternity leave as well. So I think some research, and I'm certain that there's people on this call that we would be able to engage and get the correct answer to that question.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll, if anyone, if the questioner wants to contact, we can, find, get some answers,
Sure.
and we'll probably be discussing that.
Deborah, Ramala, I'll just give a quick 30-second response. Two things.
Okay.
If the company size is more than 50 employees, the Family Medical Leave Act allows 12 weeks of unpaid leave to be given to both men and women for the care of either a family member or a child that is adopted, or your own child for the newborn, or continuing caregiving of the child if this is a child that's not sick, or another member of the family. So it's 12 weeks of unpaid leave that can be taken intermittently or in one block over a period of 1 year. So that's the federal law that's there if your employer has more than 50 employees. Second, quick resource, a lot of things are available for free, but this might require paid membership with the Society for Human Resource Management, shrm.org. They have a ton of templates, resources, policies, communication plans, toolkits, you name it, to roll things out for both men and women. How it works, what are the pitfalls. So great resource to try out. I think the professional membership is around $180 or $200. I know it because I'm a member of that. So I've been using it forever. Wonderful resource.
Okay, great. That's good. Very good. Okay, I think this will be our last question. Questioner wants to know how women can survive and thrive when they're competing against each other for what the questioner is saying, the few female roles, but any roles in the company. How do you see this evolving trend of woman versus woman? Not that it's different than what goes on among men, but is it different for women? And how what would you suggest, Laura? I think for coming up a winner when you have this kind of situation.
I'm actually interested in hearing everybody's response to this. I want to kind of refute the premise of that a little bit. I think that the idea that there are only a few slots for women, that is a reality that's created by the systemic imbalance, of course. And so I think we don't want to go into agreement with that. And unfortunately, it doesn't make it any easier when you are in a company that is not actively promoting diversity and inclusion and equity in the workforce, but that's a real leadership problem. And I think it's a conversation to try to elevate up to the leadership level as much as possible, and I know that's easier said than done. I would my real answer to that is I would refuse to be placed in a role where I feel like I am in competition with other women. That is, I think, kind of a false reality to be put into. And I would actually, I think a better response to that is to be proactive about forming affinity groups for women in your industry and in your company so that you can create more of an alliance and try to actually go away from the competitive environment that has been created, if that's the situation that you're perceiving. But I'm interested to hear what Ramala and Angela think about that.
Okay, we might have to do...
Yeah,
okay,
I completely agree with you, and I'm glad you said it like it is. So, and it might be used as a strategy to divide and conquer rather than to build and support. When they say, oh, there's few of you, and you have to compete with each other to get to that point. So it's more of a strategy to keep people down rather than to elevate them. So I'm completely on board with your analysis, Laura.
Okay.
Come to the GWIC conference.
Yes.
Yes. Good idea. You'll hear more about this. Okay. All right. Listen, I think that's all the time we're going to have for questions today. And Believe me, you'll be able to find any of us, so hopefully your questions will get answered. So please join me in thanking Dr. Romila Singh, Laura Royster, and Angela Cody for their presentations, as well as our sponsor, InEight. If you have any additional questions, as I said, please don't hesitate to click the Email Us button. You'll see all our emails there, and you can get follow-up information. And please visit enr.com/webinars for the archive of this presentation, as well as information about our upcoming programs. And now I'd like to reintroduce Suzanne Motika from InEight, who will share some closing comments. Suzanne?
Thank you. I'd just like to wrap up this webinar by once again reminding the audience the value of moving to a digitized platform. Hewitt started this endeavor with InEight several years ago and has steadily seen improved productivity and increased cost savings. I think I'm on the right slide. Okay. As you can see from the statistics included in this study performed by CII, over time, the value that is gained by an integrated digital solution is significant and spans all areas from project planning to execution. Our other customers are seeing improvements as well. This slide just kind of shows a sampling of our clients that are either using all of our products as an integrated solution or are using one or more in a modular way. And finally, I'd like to close out by letting everyone know that the next webinar for InEight will be April 24th, where Dr. Dan Patterson will introduce the concept of consensus-based planning, a new approach to ensuring your project team member expertise is accounted for in your cost and schedule forecast. Thank you, everyone.